So now I can't read this thing to you because the guest is uncomfortable.
What do you mean?
I know. I
Well,
wanted to read this thing, man, about Nazi Germany.
Oi, oi, oi.
Let me read it. John won't engage. This is between me and Khomotso. NPR.org. So for anyone who's joining us now, Khomotso asked if reparations are a real thing and why do black people ask for reparations, and if anyone's received them, who do they get paid to? Right? So this is just one article. www.npr.org. This was released on 15 June 2023 by Bill Chappell. Germany will pay more than $1.4 billion next year to survivors of Nazi atrocities. The German government will pay more than $1.4 billion next year to Holocaust survivors in the latest compensation for atrocities and persecution inflicted by the Nazis. Nearly $890 million of this will go toward home care services, an increasingly vital aspect of the reparation effort as the Nazis' victims advance in age nearly 80 years after the Holocaust ended. Holocaust ended. The payments stem from annual negotiations between Germany's Federal Ministry of Finance and the Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany, an organization representing Jewish Holocaust. Is it Holocaust?
Holocaust.
Holocaust. C-A-U-S-T. I normally hear Holocaust, but yeah, anyways, Holocaust survivors, also known as the Claims Conference. The funds are meant to help survivors live in dignity decades after they were persecuted and lost loved ones and property. Every year, these negotiations become more and more critical as this last generation of Holocaust survivors age and their needs increase. Greg Schneider, the Claims Conference's executive president, said in a news release. As of September 2022, an estimated 280,000 Holocaust survivors were living in countries around the world, the Claims Conference said. The money for 2024 includes $535 million in direct payments to survivors, which is what you're asking. Do people receive cash themselves? Ranging from monthly pensions to a one-time annual payment of 1,250 euros per person. The compensation slated for 2024 eclipses the more than $1.2 billion Germany agreed to pay in 2023. So last year they paid $1.2 billion. This year they're paying $1.4 billion. And then the article goes on. So I guess that's how it's sorted. But we'll discuss it. We'll discuss it later.
Doesn't sound like enough.
Doesn't sound like enough.
No, 1,000 euros per individual. That's what you said, right? An annual.
Yeah, but that's
1,000 euros.
cash outside of benefits.
Oh, there's other benefits. Oh.
1.4 billion divided by 280. It's about $5,000 this year per survivor. Okay. Anyways, John Savage.
Yeah, I'm here.
This is what Dube said. I must ask if Savage is really your name or if you're like John Legend, but you're like, I'll go with Savage.
I'm blessed with a great name.
Too dope.
Yeah, and my kid, I call him Levi Wolf Savage, so he's got the best name.
That's a real name on his ID?
That's
Wolf.
his name, Wolf Savage. Yeah,
Oof.
yeah. Hey.
Yeah, having children with creatives. Steve Martin, Chris Martin. His child with Gwyneth Paltrow is Apple.
Yes, yeah. There's his Apple, and the other one, and then Elon Musk's is his X.
X.
And I think
They've got 7. Erica Badu and Andre 3000. And I think Pharrell's one kid is Rocket.
Frank Zappa's son is Dweezil.
Jeez.
Dweezil Zappa.
Jamie Oliver's kids have got cool names as well. I've just forgotten them now. Wolf Savage.
Yeah, he's a wolf.
Thank you, by the way. That's a really dope name.
I think so too. We're
It's
super
a really
chuffed with
dope
that
name.
name.
My kids have got dope names as well. Shout out to my kids. First one is named Bull, but Bull doesn't sound cool. Sounds cooler in
That's
Nguni
cool.
language.
I like
Mkunzi.
it. Kunzi, yeah.
Mkunzi, yeah. John, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Nice to see you again.
Are we having our meeting here or offline?
No, we're having it offline for sure.
Not here. People want to know what we're chatting about and how you want to give me lots of money and
If you're comfortable having it on air, we can give it a go.
really?
Yeah.
I think I've dreamt about this moment. That's crazy.
Is this a thing?
I'm having a deja vu moment. I think I dreamt about sitting with you here.
Really?
That's crazy. Sorry.
That's
Sorry.
okay.
You were speaking about the African Podcast Network before we started and how you guys are now starting to move in the direction you wanted.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to chat about that. We'll chat about everything that you do, but we'll just jump in and people will catch up somewhere.
So we were talking about Africa Podcast Network. So basically, the end goal, we've built the biggest podcasting network in Africa.
Yeah.
And what's interesting
Do you think it's just in Africa? Are you aware of others elsewhere?
Yeah, we're working with other networks in Africa. There's some cool people doing cool stuff.
Not on the continent. I mean, maybe you guys are the biggest in the world?
No, in Africa.
No, I'm asking, are you aware of others outside of Africa?
Oh, loads. There's loads.
Okay.
I
They're
mean,
bigger than you guys.
In the rest of the world?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Amazon have one called Wondery. It's monstrous. SiriusXM is the biggest podcast network in the world. BBC is a podcast network.
Okay.
iHeartRadio.
Okay.
It's the biggest digital radio and podcast network also in the world. There are massive things happening in the rest of the world. And that's what's quite interesting is that, one of the advantages of going overseas is that some of those markets are already quite mature. So you can see where we're heading. We started late, starting these networks here.
Yeah.
And also what's happened now in the last few months is not only do we represent our we've actually changed the whole business model. We represent our podcasters. We're also representing podcasters who are not in our network.
Sure.
And we also now represent the BBC, Amazon, SiriusXM, and Acast, the global network in Africa.
Okay.
So, and that's been really cool. And a lot of that is because it's something we spoke about on the last one, but the idea that we need to be collaborating, that there's really big opportunities and we can't work in silos. So we've actually changed our model from being like a network to actually like a vehicle that's we're really working on growing our family and opportunities for the whole of the continent, because we're now making the connecting dots in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And they're all looking here and they don't know how to access it. And the reason they don't know how to access it is because we're all working in silos.
Sure.
So did they call Penn? Did they call MacG? Who do they call? And because there's more infrastructure in the rest of the world, they can go to a large network and start working with them. And they can't do that here. So we're sort of combining forces with all of the smaller networks and the other networks to say, on top of us, to say, why don't we all work together to build? This is a very long, boring version of what we do. We're a podcast network. That part's only interesting to me, I think. But
no, it's interesting to a lot of people. I wanted to ask, who is the African Podcast Network? There are people who are going to be listening, are going to be like, I also want to be a part of it. So where do I go?
So the problem is with us is, first of all, we're like in the same way that a record label like Sony Records or Universal, they're not really public facing. So you're not out searching for APN. Our job is to support the podcasters we work with and not get in the way of them.
Sure.
So we're not looking for Penn to go out there and start promoting the Africa Podcast Network. And the other thing, and this is earlier on, we're talking about the sort of more corporatization of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And one of the new developments we've done, fortunately / unfortunately, is that when we first started the Africa Podcast Network, we had dreams of being like a record label where we find new talent and we develop that talent and we take that talent to market. But that really backfired for us. And we've actually ended up working with and signing some incredible talent, some of the biggest names you can think of. And it hasn't translated well into the podcasting space for a few reasons. Availability, enthusiasm, and actually just because you got 100 million followers or even 1 million followers on Instagram or TikTok, it doesn't translate to your pod. As you know, that you are the zeitgeist, you are creating the connection, right?
Let them know, John.
But what you're doing is it's not a given. Like you've got the recipe, and so we've lost so much time ground by working with podcasters we love and changed the strategy to only work with podcasters who already are doing well.
Okay.
And the reason is because podcasters who are doing well, their biggest struggle is understanding the monetization chain and access to capital. Yeah. Second of all, we're a tiny team doing really big work. And so why not focus on the commercial aspect? Sure. It's a win-win. And if we're sitting with podcasters who have really great potential and we're working with them and they're not making any money because we can't sell their podcast because they haven't got enough of an audience, they start getting upset with us. Like, where's all the promises? Where's all the things? So we've actually sort of built this. We're a premium network and are super selective about who we work with.
Okay.
And it's only podcasters that we understanding the marketplace and what brands and the market is looking for, and you have to fit into what they're looking for. Otherwise, how am I going to help you?
Sure.
Yes, we help with growth and connections, all that stuff. But really, what do you want? You want money, right? The podcasters want to get paid. So that's what we are entirely focused on now. From the dream of creating a family to being like hardcore focused on helping podcasts build brand safety. And what that's doing is building an economy.
Yeah.
For example, how much do you charge for a live read? Or how do you know how much to charge? There's no format.
Sure.
Like you might make up your rate card. It might be
That's correct.
exactly opposite to someone else's. So we're using this network to start standardizing so that everyone can kind of charge similarly.
Some market rates of sorts based on
sort of
some
market rate.
metrics.
And that means approaching brands is a lot easier. And when they see the numbers, they don't go, he, that's too cheap, or what the hell is this guy thinking?
Yeah.
They understand what the market value is. I don't know if anything I'm saying. This is what I do all day, every day, is this discussion, but I'm not sure that it's a...
No, you and I are having a meeting. Forget the audience. They'll
for a
jump in if
meeting.
they feel like it.
All right, so the meeting. Yeah.
You're uncomfortable mentioning people's names.
Regarding
This
what?
is not a trick question.
Well, it depends on what you're going to ask me, because I work with podcasters, the podcasters I work with, part of the reason we work with them, they're very protective over their analytics and their income and all that stuff. But I will tell you, some of our podcasters who are not even that huge are 100K a month almost. We're around that part easily. And they're not, and those are not, there are other podcasters who should be making more revenue, but we're learning there's other factors.
Sure.
The person
100,000 is income, 100,000 rand.
Yeah. And growing. We're growing those sort of things.
Sure.
We're trying to grow. And that's for a mid-level podcaster.
You were saying other factors, sorry.
So dealing with podcasters is tricky, right?
Yeah.
The podcasters that do really well are not the biggest ones. The
I
ones
can imagine.
who really are reliable, right?
Safe.
Who are not safe is important.
Yeah.
Safe is very important. But reliable means open to flexibility, deliver what they say they're going to deliver on time. And if something goes wrong, are very quick to try and correct them.
Okay.
Now, if you don't have those things, and a lot of guys don't, and gals, it makes work, it just is like such a shortcut to a decrease in potential revenue.
Sure.
And yeah, the other thing we are finding is like news is really hard. We signed one of the great news podcasts, and his numbers are great and his engagement is great, but brands don't really want to get too close to news, a lot of brands.
Okay.
So we struggled with that and eventually parted ways until we can figure that out. And we also now see like comedy is really important, entertainment is really important, business podcasts like critical.
Okay.
So we're understanding more about what sectors are interesting to brands.
Sure.
And where, more importantly, if you're a podcaster, where you should be investing energy. And we're seeing a lot of that. That's the cool part, is understanding what the marketplace looks like.
Do you consume local podcasts? Are you aware of like all of them or the biggest ones?
I think I am mostly aware. I mean, I'm always looking for growth, but I mean, through the whole continent. So I'm always looking for podcasts.
Sure.
And yeah, I've stopped looking for podcasts I like.
I hear you.
And started to focus on podcasts whose audience you can define.
Yeah.
This is the whole thing. A lot of people come and say, I've got a great idea for a podcast. Can you help me pitch it to a brand? And the answer is no. Okay. Because it's not the same as going to a TV show, a TV company or a radio station that has an audience. If you're starting a podcast, you're starting with zero.
Correct.
So if a brand says yes and gives you 50 grand, and by the end of that 50 grand, you've got 3 listens, that brand has wasted their money and they'll never touch podcasting again. You've heard everybody.
Correct.
Also, brands do not care about the subject matter of the podcast or how good your idea is. They care about your audience. So the more you understand your audience, the more you're connecting and you're getting engagement from your audience, even if it's not massive. If it's a small niche audience, that's gold in the marketing space.
Is this like a lesson for podcasters to say, create content? I'm not even sure how. Create content, but read comments, respond to comments, find ways to figure out, outside of the general analytics, to figure out who are these people and where are they from, like in real time. Almost run polls and surveys on whatever platform, be like, who's based in Durban, Joburg, what are you into? And then almost take that feedback. Is that like a call for podcasters to maybe do some of that work?
Without doubt. However, there's a starting point. So I think for me, the biggest revelation from this last trip, I've just come back from DC.
Washington.
It's from Washington. So
Came back with dollars. Thanks, John.
I left with a lot less dollars than I went with.
Fuck.
That place
Send him Lungu to America. He comes back, no money.
Well, I came back no money, but I came back with a lot less money than I went with. It was insane. But in terms of the mission, I mean, again, there was 3 of us from this continent that were there. It was us. It was the guys from Afropods from Kenya who are amazing people, and I love what their business. Afripods. Yeah.
Okay.
And then the Atunwa, who are the other. So those are like the players. There was just the 3 of us there, kind of, and really workshopping Africa, and there's so much opportunity. And this is what these trips are about, connecting us. We're so disconnected industry-wise to what's actually going on. And we're trying to build those connections. But that's another point. So
Thank you, by the way, to yourself for representing us. I think it's very important.
I'm now trying to figure out, and maybe this is it, how to get all the information out.
Yeah.
Like that's what I'm trying to figure out is that was a learning mission that we all need to learn from. But it's all the information is in my head and on voice notes. What do I do with it? How do I put it into the world? So, but here's one. Here's the real gold one, I think, is that, do you know Steve Bartlett, The Diary of a CEO?
Very much so.
Of everything that was there, even though he wasn't American, he flew in and flew out. His talk, like, fucked my head up. It was so brilliant on so many levels. And the real thing he is doing, I mean, he's overtaken everyone now. And it's because he's understood something that I want. I don't, when I say want, I don't mean like I want. I think.
Sorry, I'm a bit hot.
Oh, no worries.
Sorry. If you don't mind, please carry on, John.
The
one thing Stephen Bartlett has figured out and what you
that
want.
I think we should all embrace, like the insight that I think should wake up potential podcasters and current podcasters is, until recently, like doing a podcast on your phone or just 2 people having a long chat for 2 hours or whatever kind of goes with what you have, that has been fine.
Yeah.
But the game has changed in a significant way. Netflix is struggling. The Netflix model doesn't work. They're struggling around the world. YouTube has grown as a podcasting platform. Suddenly, here in Africa, we were always into YouTube, but now suddenly the whole world's gone, oh shit, we need YouTube for our podcast. And YouTube's becoming such an important part of podcasting, not by itself. You need both. You need audio. The audio plays such a huge role in a big part of podcasting, but the video component is critical. So that's all waking up. But the competition is strong now. And people need to treat their podcasts like they are pitching to Netflix. It's got to be brilliant. They've got to think about the show. They've got to think about format. Format is such a big thing. Like, format can be, I'm doing a show. I think this was actually one of the examples I heard. I'm doing a show for with someone to talk about the guest that ghosted me. I mean, my ex that ghosted you.
Yeah.
And after you've told the story, the guest comes out. Now that's format, right? That's format. And why that's a good format is because someone, did you see that podcast? Did you see that podcast that happened? And so these podcasts are becoming not podcasts, but shows for us. And they need to be strong like that. Doesn't mean production, doesn't mean Hollywood production. It means we've really got to think about what we're putting out there, how it starts, what the format is. And he was experimenting with stuff like, how did it impact reach and engagement when he was interviewing some brain scientist, and before the show he decided he went and got an actual human brain. And so he had an actual human brain in his hand when the podcast started. And broke all records for engagement for that because of what he was able to put on the social media. He seeded something in a prop because he's thinking about format. And I think this is where, as the podcasting space is quite sleepy everywhere, the podcasts that are now breaking through are the podcasts that are really unique. You know, there's the local guy, Josh Rubin. Do you know the Wide Awake podcast?
Yes, Wide Awake.
Why
podcast
is that
in Cape Town?
That thing is blowing up globally. Why? Because he's almost never seen a podcast before. He's invented his own format, right? He's like an alien making a podcast. It's so fresh.
Shout out to Josh Rubin. I saw he did something with the ears.
He did the thing with his, but you don't understand. You've just proved the point.
Yeah.
That's format. He did the thing with the ears. Now, if you can't...
Something classy. He did something with his ears.
Yeah, he
Josh has got huge
them.
ears. Jeez.
But if you can't say that about someone's podcast, and a lot of podcasters are sort of going, all right, Mike's on, I'm interesting, you're interesting, let's have a chat. And that's enough. It's not enough anymore. And especially if you're a new podcast, it's a crowded market. There's only a few people who can do it really well, and they've got that market. How are you going to compete? So now we have like 60, 70 copycat podcasts with 1,000 people each. That's, you know, so it's that innovation that we need to, and I think because podcasting's so young still, that any of these young guys coming to start podcasts got to come out the gate swinging with something so cool, so authentic, so different, and they can win because everyone's living on YouTube now. That's their destination for content. And that was a real cool thing that I was like, I agree. So even at Amped, we're starting to have conversations about why don't we start working more closely with podcasters about upping the production value, understanding preparation, doing more research, like having some scripts where need be so that the show quality can go up, because I think it's going to make a huge impact.
Let me go back to where I was asking if you're uncomfortable with names.
Okay.
I've got a lot to say. Maybe my first question before I go back is, what was this thing in Washington, D.C. that you went to?
It's the largest podcasting conference in the world, apparently. It's called the Podcast Movement. They're every year. They have a couple of smaller ones every year. This was the main one.
Okay. Is it in the same place every year?
No, it changes.
Okay.
So it's in Chicago next year. This one was in DC. It moves around.
America.
In America,
It moves around America.
Only America.
Okay.
It's very huge and quite corporate. My disappointment, I mean, I was in a lot of talks and I got a lot of insights, and again was like frustrated, like the most brilliant data insights businesses around podcasting, giving all the trends of podcasts around the world, all the branded stuff. They don't have any data for Africa at all.
Sure.
And something we've now...
It's an opportunity.
Yeah, well, we're in discussions with them. Plug into our network, we'll start giving it, because we need that data.
Sure.
We don't have it. There was a lot of talks, and I actually found, because the American market is so mature, it was lacking innovation. When I was at the London one before, I was just blown away by what's going on. In the America one, I was like, we could clean up here. This is if we were here or brought our podcast here, we would eat them for breakfast.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of plateaued. They've had all the exciting stuff, so everyone's wondering what's next. But technology has come forward, and what's happening here in Africa is truly innovative and interesting.
Yeah.
So I felt like, wow, there are so many opportunities here. Also meeting more global podcasters. The next thing we want to start doing is the APN, and this is not for just the podcasters we're working with, but with the podcasters we're not working with, is identifying partnerships where the biggest podcasters in the world do a collab show with an African podcast, and it works both ways. We get their audience, they get our audience. We get a toe in their market, they get a toe in our market, because there's very little overlap.
Yeah.
And so that's very exciting to see how that's going to help build community and get sort of things moving.
That would be so dope.
There was a lot of stats and a lot of businesses and a lot of companies. That's really what it was. It was very corporate.
One of the things you said earlier triggered why I asked, because I already saw faces in my head, and I know some of these people personally. That's why I was a bit hesitant to raise names, and I asked you if you're comfortable with names. A lot of people obviously still don't know what podcasting is or what it's supposed to be. So one of the mistakes many people have made, which I understand why you guys made the mistake. I think many people maybe will realize that these guys have been making mistakes. A lot of radio personalities, Garrett Cliff, DJ Spoo, DJ Fresh, I can't think of anyone else who've gone almost podcasting. I know Spoo, think Fresh was involved. Gareth Cliff and Thibaut Touch tried to do like online radio a while back. It didn't quite work out. And maybe they thought podcasting was going to be that. Like, this is going to be the beginning of online radio. And radio does have a format, and it works. They've got their links, they've got their music, it works. And because they are legends in radio, I think they thought they'd come and copy and paste that in podcasting. And podcasting is not that. And the reason people moved to podcast, or they moved, was because they wanted something different from mainstream TV, mainstream radio. And you struggle to adjust. This is all you know.
Yeah.
The idea of just sparking up a conversation, thinking off the top of your head, talking rubbish. I think for some of them, even having the license to swear, you can see they still kind of hold back because where they come from, they couldn't do that.
It's uncomfortable. Yeah.
I think DJ Smooth's done it well.
Yeah.
Shout out to him. He's been able to actually podcast quite well. And Smooth pivots quite well just in various ways. I think Fresh has struggled. I think Gareth Cliff has struggled. Thibaut Touch and DJ Smooth, they went back to radio. They went back to what they kind of know. And I'm raising this because there's also a lot of hip-hop artists, successful and otherwise, that have gone into podcasting, also saying, I've got a big audience. Look at how many followers I have on Instagram, and I will podcast, and they think they're going to make it. One of them, Altito, I think is doing well.
I was going to say, he is killing it. He is, I think, one of the most powerful podcasters out there, actually, because, again, he's got his audience is so engaged.
Yeah.
They are there for him. It's incredible. What he's doing is I'm really blown away by. So I'm with you on that.
Smashes. I don't know if his name is still Smashes. That was his rap name. It might have changed to Gift. I don't know what happened to his podcast, if it's still around. I know the LES. I know he was ill recently, but he had a podcast and then it seemed to stop at some point.
Right.
But I think it's for people to understand that just because you are known somewhere, Siya Kolisi starts a podcast and assumes it's just going to blow up. Trevor Noah, I'd like to think, based on his star reach, I don't think his podcast is doing well. He had to sit down with Kevin Hart. I think it did over 170,000 views, which for us is huge. But for his level and Kevin Hart's level, it was surprising. So I think some of us in podcasting need to understand, if we're trying to understand, that this platform is not what people think it is, and then try and figure out what it actually is and where it's going. You want to say something?
Oh, I couldn't agree. All of those things I very much agree. The one thing I was just going to say, I don't know about I think the Trevor Noah show actually did well, but it wasn't a YouTube show. It was part of Spotify's campaign to start launching their internal video thing that never worked.
Okay.
And it got big numbers in the audio space. It was really driven for that. But I agree with you. It could have done a lot better. And you're 100% right. And I think it's such a different animal. And like we said it earlier, like it's signing a famous person starting a pod. It actually fails more often than not. And the reason is, if you are a radio legend, like some of the ones you've mentioned, every day you go onto a mic and you speak to 1 million people, and you've got 1 million plus followers on your Instagram and your social media pages. That's your audience.
Yeah.
And you also have the kind of respect of brands who are used to you having this kind of influence.
Yeah.
And so where I think a lot of damage has happened with some of the people that you mentioned in the industry is that they moved into the digital space, and they also managed to get brands to come in with them to sort of invest in it. But those numbers, when you start in this space, you're starting from scratch, right? Like 10 is a number. 20 listeners is a real number. And there's a podcast, there's a podcast that I'm working with, a branded podcast, that a year later, they're sort of at 200 listens on the audio front, So it's really, really hard. And I think the problem is a lot of the well-known established people that get into the podcasting space, their assumptions are too high. That's why they fail. And then after 2 months or 3 months, they can't handle the fact that they're at 1,000 listeners. So they're getting all the social media fluff.
Yeah.
And their first episode probably got 50,000, 60,000, 80,000 because everyone was excited.
Sure.
But by the 15th episode, they've gone down to the hundreds, and that's very hard to take if you're used to this.
100%.
And so, yeah, then they either quit or fluff, like
Sure.
try and see what to go there. So I think it's a huge problem.
I love that you reference Sony and record labels, because one of the things that myself and other podcasters that are trying to study the game and just online content creation have been speaking about is, where is this thing going? Because it can go in so many different ways. But is it a situation where, let's say, studios like Amped, maybe the African Podcast Network, is trying to create platforms to say, we will maybe even give you shows. We've got a show idea. We think business. We've already got a banking partner or an insurance company to come through. We've seen some of your content somewhere. Maybe it's vlogs with your phone. You seem to be very knowledgeable. People like you. We'd like you to come and host this thing, and then we'll pay you, kind of situation. Versus one of the things you said in our last sit down, you were like, bro, your audience is your audience. Don't let that go. And I was like, I hear you, but there are kids that don't want that. They want the established. We've already got the Podcast and Chill network, over 1 million subscribers. Here's a show idea. You've got this knowledge, or you've got this following. Just come through and do this thing, and then we'll pay you.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't want to be involved in measuring analytics, understanding RPM and CPM, and I don't even want the format. You do the format, you do the everything, and I just come through.
Okay, let me answer that for you. That's the greatest question, and it's so weirdly timed. It's so poignant what you're saying. And the good and the bad of it is this, is that we are now, like I said to you, we're a fledgling business. We started with zero. We had an idea. We spent a year building it, and then starting to have to blah, 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 blah. And now we're like, okay, now we are a proper business with proper people and proper clients. And now we're like corporatizing. And we've just started this conversation yesterday.
Yeah.
And the only reason you don't do it, when we first started, when we were in dreamer phase, we just want to support podcasts. We want to grow the industry. But now we're like, we've got overheads. We've got projections. We've got revenue targets, all that crap, right?
And deliverables.
Yeah. And we've got problems, and we've got issues and all that stuff. So now you start having to kind of really build a business. And the reason that we've never done it before is because actually to do that, you need real capital. You need real money to invest in content. And it's why Amazon do it. So Amazon, if you sign to Amazon, they own your show. You pay, it's called Wondery, is the Amazon network. They buy so they started the Smartless show, Smartless? So they started this podcast, one of the biggest audio-only podcasts on the planet, called Smartless.
Smartless.
Smartless, yes.
Audio. No, please carry on, sir. Sorry.
So they built this podcast. They own the podcast. They pay the podcasters. They just sold the podcast for $100 million.
Jason Bateman, Sean Hayes, and Will Arnett.
That's the one, yeah. So they sold the podcast for $100 million.
Ooh.
To one of the other major networks. I think it was to Sirius. So we actually represent them now because we
Sirius
represent
with
Sirius.
the C, right?
S-I-R.
Oh, sorry.
Sirius XM.
Sirius XM. Cool. I've seen the name. I don't know why I thought C. Sorry.
So that podcast is worth $100 million. Now, here's we're going under the hood here. Here's some, the problem with our business, and it's why we're starting to have this conversation is, and this is the only part I'm hesitant to say out loud, we are vulnerable as a business because we've set up the business with intentions and dreams, and we're building this business and it's doing great. That's awesome. But we are vulnerable because we don't own any assets. I don't own the podcast. So we've said, if you're a part of the Africa Podcast Network, we've said, we want the best possible deal for you, the creator. Sure. We have a revenue share deal. We have no ownership over your IP. We promote independence. Yeah. And theoretically and ideologically, that's what we stand for. That's why we built it. But moving forward, we're like, we don't have any assets. No one can ever build our business. And if we ever, someone wants to overtake us or destroy us, they'll just buy their way through us. So now we're starting to say, well, the only way to actually grow this thing properly is we actually need to invest in some content that we own. Because if your podcast has inherent value, so if let's say we buy the Pen show, we buy your show, and we say we own it, but you have a 10% stake in it. Then in a few years' time, as part of our network, if we sell the network or we sell your podcast to another network, it has real value.
Sure.
But you're not attached to us in any shape or form, so it has no value to us.
Sure.
And that's why we're starting to say, well, how do we now find podcasts that we are willing to invest money into own, to partner with them, but then they actually are under our control in the way that a artist is under the banner of a record label. So the record label will invest in the artist. They will own the masters. And is that good or bad? It depends on the podcast. That's not everybody's cup of tea, you know? So that is what you're saying. There just isn't podcasting still. That's happening everywhere in the world. So at DC, there was a stand for iHeartRadio. Come and pitch us your podcast. Lines around the block.
Yeah.
And if iHeart sign you, you're earning a salary from your podcast. You're now iHeartRadio. So yeah, that does happen. And it's just not here yet, I think.
Do we need long money for that? I don't know if NASPER still has appetites to invest in, because they're the only popular, I think, big company in this country that I was aware of years ago that would invest in like technology startups with no revenue and just be like, go build, we'll give you the money. I don't know if we have others that are willing. We speak about venture capitalists and those guys, but I don't even think they'd even consider a podcast.
It's just that the market is very tough at the moment. So we're in a slump where media companies are struggling and going out of business.
This is mainstream media.
Mainstream media. So I think you're gonna see a lot of change. Like there's gonna be a lot of major companies that are going to these media businesses that are struggling over the next few years. It's just been announced that a lot of the really big brands are because media budgets are tighter. They're reallocating all of their budgets to YouTube and Facebook, which means no local cap. That means all our money is going offshore. And in the podcasting space, we are fighting for our little corner, but that's made life a lot more difficult. So the real issue is, I think a lot of the big media businesses who can afford the content, they're kind of getting burned on their digital content, and they're not quite sure how revenue works in this digital video space. And it's something we're trying to work more closely with them because we think we have a solve, and we want to make the circle bigger. So it's just that. Yeah, the budgets are it's a very tough time in the market at the moment.
I need to give a shout out to Rena Broomberg.
Rena.
You know Rena?
Yeah, mate.
Yeah, she's a fan of mine. I'm a fan of hers. And I was at Prime Media a few weeks ago, and I ended up reading up on the story of how, I think it's Nate Kirsch and his brother, Rena and them were at the beginning when it was still Boputsatswana, how they set up 702, which eventually became Prime Media. And I'm wondering if companies like Prime Media are looking into, because there's sharp people there.
They are looking.
Let's see if we can begin investing in what might be where the industry is going and what potential collaboration we could be doing. Because Rena works with Gareth. They do the podcast party as well, which I've had the pleasure of attending and speaking on a panel. To what you're saying about silos, there's just a lot of conversations that are happening. But because we still don't know what this thing is, we don't know where it's going. My concern is, and I'm not sure if you're even thinking about this as yet, if podcasting becomes the new music industry and we start having pop-up podcast, I don't know what you'd call them, but the equivalent of a record label. And now podcasters are complaining. Oh, John Savage screwed me over. And how learning from the past, yourself, and maybe others who want to do the same thing, how you protect yourself from that not happening again, since it's happened before.
I don't know the answer to that. And the reality is, I have been fighting the indie fight. When I was an artist, I was signed to major labels. I fought with the labels. I complained about all these things. So
shout out to Cassette.
How you feel and what you've just described, I'm that guy. I was always fighting for years and years and years. Everything's unfair. And predictably, I'm now on the other side. And I'm looking at I'm saying to much smarter people than me, this is how it must be. And they go, okay, let's just quickly do a spreadsheet. Now, if you do this and this and this and that's just how you want it, This is what you end up with. You're 6 million rand in debt after year 1. And you're like, okay, no, well, I don't want that, right? Okay, well, therefore, you have to build it like this and this. And they start saying things that I've been going for years. Like, oh, no, but. And you put those things in and you go like, okay, well, now I understand. Like you as the podcaster, you only see, John is bringing me a campaign for 50,000 Rand. And he's taking 30% of that.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell? What you didn't see is the 8 months and the 6 people and that's what this team is doing. And now I'm in so deep in that and seeing the amount of time and resources, effort and energy it gets to get that one thing. Then, and in the industry, most of these deals are 50-50. We're 70-30.
Yeah.
And that was because we were 2080. And it was when my business partner showed me how we were going to absolutely see our ass, where they told me we need to get it as close to 50-50 as possible, that we ended up at 70-30 was where we are now. Because I still want to try and make a version of the reality that I think exists. So I'm on the other side now. I'm the corporate motherfucker.
Yeah.
I'm the record label guy now.
You're the shark.
And I'm understanding what is necessary to actually make a viable business.
How do we teach kids this thing? Because I've made videos before explaining I inherit money from my dad. I decide I'm going to be an entrepreneur. I set up a record label. I get 10 artists. One of them pops.
Yeah.
The other 9 are huge fuck-ups.
Yeah.
This one sees how much money they've made. They don't understand why they're making so little. I'm like, but I've made losses and I took a risk. You also didn't know you were going to pop.
Yeah.
And how do we get people to understand, considering that this might be where we're headed, because this might be the only capitalist model that works with money. How do we get kids that are coming into podcasting not in future complaining and being like, we actually understand this has happened in the past, or is it inevitable?
I can't predict the future. I think it's just the way things work, the ebbs and flows. You know, when something is new and fledgling, everything's shiny.
Yeah.
As things get bigger and more secure and stars get bigger, because this is the problem with podcasts. I'm dealing with stars all the time.
Sure.
And as the stars get bigger, they feel differently about stuff.
Of course, they speak to a lot of different people as well. People are whispering in their ears.
Absolutely. Everyone's coming to them, and suddenly the opportunity you gave them that made them what they are today is not so important because there's other things on that side.
Of course.
And so I just think this is not my sales pitch, but like we really love our podcasts as we bend over backwards. We've done the best possible deal according to like what is humanly possible.
Sure.
And our thing is we haven't got anyone signed to us in a contract they can't get out of. Our philosophy is if we can just make them always feel valued and that they're always getting a good deal, they'll never leave us. Let's hope. And
hope is not a strategy,
naive.
John.
I know, and that's why we've built this business on dreams. It's working, and now we're learning how to build a real business and what we need to do that business. And so maybe does that mean we need more? We need to start, inevitably in the next 6 months, we're going to start having to have slightly stricter contracts, because when you come to APN, there is a lot we're doing in the standardized, if you look at a deck that we build after years, it will give you everything you need to know.
Sure.
And it's the standardization of what things cost. It's how we do our reporting. It's how I do the valuation. It's how to communicate. All of this massive stuff that doesn't exist before we started doing it. And we've built this chain. Now, if I give you my deck and a client approaches you directly, you've got all the tools.
Yeah.
And so that's also where we're vulnerable, because we're so like pro-podcaster, pro-independence.
Sure.
But it was necessary. It was almost like it has been necessary to build what we've built to get to this point. And now we're trying to see what is the next point we do without jeopardizing our values and without making anybody feel like they're taken advantage of.
I want to speak about drag. I want to speak about being recruited.
Drag? Did you say drag?
Drag, yeah. DRAGG. Sorry, this is a person.
Okay.
Not drag. Not other types of drag. Okay, let me just start with drag. So I had an amazing young guy here. He's visually impaired, South African guy. He's currently living in the UK. He's in music.
Right, I know this guy.
Do you?
Either you've told me about, someone's told me about it before.
And one of the things he was speaking about is how South African artists are sleeping on themselves. And he referenced Black Coffee. I brought in Euphonic, and he says not enough South African artists are going overseas and just spending time there just to build networks. So what if you're a big deal in South Africa? No one knows you, no one cares. You want to get into a bigger market. And at the time, I started thinking specifically about podcasting. And I sat with Josh Rubin last year, I think. He went to America for I don't know how long. And he was going around filming podcasts. The stuff that we're meant to be talking about and doing. To say, go to the UK, you're not going to sit with Stephen Bartlett and Chris Williamson. You're not going to meet Joe Rogan. But the idea is to get your foot in so people are aware of you.
Yeah.
The work that you are doing now to be like, we want to be out there and known. I remember at some point, Casper, who was our first YouTube sensation, I think Shade Giliberti, if I'm not mistaken, and a couple of other YouTube guys, not podcasters, moved to London.
You're talking about that other guy, Casper, not
Casper in your vest.
I remember
white
him.
boy Casper.
The white boy Casper, yeah.
White
He
boy
was like
Casper.
he was South African, but he wasn't here. He left very early.
He left very early. He was making money while he was in high school.
Yeah.
He could have potentially been a Mr. Beast, depending on how he moved.
Yeah.
Just your thoughts on, because you already speak about collaboration, which is dope. You've got your Burner Boys, you've obviously had your Trevor Noahs, Black Coffee, taking podcasters, the right type of people who understand the vision and are not in it for themselves. And I know what your answer is going to be. The idea of the work you're doing and being recruited overseas so that you don't have to struggle with all the things you're struggling for. Someone in the UK, someone in America sees the work, the talent, the vision. They're like, come help us do this. The brands are already there. Our platforms are here. You're going to make a lot of money. Just come here and leave that puzzle shop that you're busy with.
So this is where I think is the opportunity. What happened to Josh? Josh went overseas to do exactly what you said, and he came back. And he came back because he was like, you know what? The problem in America is everyone's already done everything in America. We have not had our stories told. So whether this is strategic or by accident, Josh is building South African stories that are getting global reach. And so he's earning dollars because his audience is largely South African, but he's growing is international because he identified, we are unique here.
Yeah.
They don't know anything about us. That's what I'm going to focus on. Brilliant, right? Yeah. And even when I'm over there, the uniqueness around just wearing this cap, I met 1,000 people a day just because of this cap.
Yeah.
All these kind of African Americans who are so into Africa, they never fucking thought about Africa before, right? And so they want to talk about, they never even thought about coming here before. It's madness, right? So we are a mystery, and we have great storytellers, and we're doing great stuff. And that's why I think the opportunity is staying here. Yes, go and build your networks. And that's why I say if I can team Pen up with Joe Rogan, whatever, and what happens is that you grow your audience both. Remember, we're all about audiences, right? So you've got your South African audience, you've got a glass ceiling. So now you want to build your Kenyan audience, and now you want to build your Nigerian audience, and maybe you want to build your American audience. And how do you strategically do that? And it was, me and Mac discussed this for years, but never really figured out how to implement this. We thought maybe just go to America and interview some stars, but it wasn't really I don't think we were deep enough about it. But this idea that if you can collaborate, and you have an advantage being from here, because these big podcasters in America and UK and Europe, they don't know much about here, and they don't know who to get hold of. And they've been here once on holiday with their wife to a game reserve. That's their interaction, right? So by you being on their podcast, you being on theirs, you now have a new small market to build in the global arena. And when the Americans watch your video on YouTube, you're earning the dollars, not the rands.
Yeah.
You only get your YouTube revenue and your audio revenue from the listener, not from you. So when a South African listener watches your video, that's the sense you made. But if you're earning the dollars and the pounds, now you're growing your business into a global business from here. As soon as you go to London, America, you're just another fish in the pond, and you've lost the thing that gave you all your edge.
Unique.
Yeah.
I used to be ignorant about that. I remember complaining about why YouTube pays Americans more than us. You guys are unfair. You're discriminating. And someone explained, no, it's based on the viewer. If you make a video here, gets watched by an American audience, it means they're pushing American ads and you're getting paid in dollars, which is much
100%.
higher than here.
Yeah.
There's something I wanted to say about mainstream. I'm concerned because you're now speaking commercialization and business, and something similar happens in the music industry where you're speaking format. I've already got big issues with Stephen Bartlett, even though he's done amazingly well. But he almost himself, Chris Williamson, maybe not so much Joe Rogan, and a couple of other guys are almost at that top level of what your podcast could become. And I find it almost dangerous to encourage kids that are entering to do that. It goes back to interviews Mr. Beast has done, to be like, I've been giving a lot of game about how I've built my thing. I never wanted people to copy me. I wanted people to come in with something new. So you may find in future the biggest African podcast is not speaking English that is understood in America and UK. It's speaking in Swahili. And they're not podcasting in a nice room like this, which could be anywhere in the world. They literally at a game reserve, elephants are passing and it's not CGI, or they're at someone's hut and they're eating whatever. And it's like, this is what the world wanted. Because if you're going to be, I've just started a fast food chain, come taste it. Americans like, but this tastes like KFC.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah, right, you like it. It's like, I didn't come to Africa to eat KFC, man. We've got that. So I'm almost concerned as we formalize, and also the other fear, which I've always had an issue with, listening to brands. Brands have a way they operate. They have a way their marketing budgets are set up. They know how they do their conversions and when they want to dictate to new and potentially new platforms as if they're speaking to mainstream, they may miss the juice. And I think you and I have spoken about this, the authenticity of working with a brand, where don't ask a podcaster influencer to be like, hey, drink what? You're like, his audience is going to hate it. They're like, this is what we ran away from. Find out who this person is, find their unique IP, who they are, and then bring the brands that align to who they are.
100%.
So
yeah,
I'm just concerned
art
about you referencing Stephen Bartlett and them and how formalized they are now, and that becoming just another mainstream just on YouTube.
Okay, Steve Bartlett, let's just put this. Steve Bartlett is not even operating on any level on planet Earth, right? Steve Bartlett, when he does a podcast, the amount of research that goes into an episode that they do before they even do anything. Then, when they've chosen their guest, so the Pen's their guest, they then do other research using tech to find every question that Pen has ever been asked, ever. And they place it into a form. And then they also find out what questions are searched about in this field that have not been asked. And then they build their sort of show questions out of those two factors. Then, once they record the interview and they do a lot of testing, they test. One of the things they learned was the temperature in the room has a massive impact on the conversation.
Damn.
And they've done a measurement on the amount of oxygen, and they've started, when the oxygen drops a certain level, the conversation drops in terms of energy.
Yeah.
So they now make sure that the rooms that they're doing interviews are in a certain level. Then, once the interview is done, they do 5 edits of that interview, and they've built an app called Flight Studio. It has 1,000 people on it that are all, it's eye tracking on it. They each watch it, and it learns where they lose interest, what they're not watching, what they find interesting, and everything. Then they do the same testing with all the thumbnails, and when that show goes out, it dominates, right?
hits.
And one of the things he says is, and I love this, was like, all we want to do is do 1% better, incremental 1% than the one before.
Kaizen.
Yes.
Kaizen principle from Japan.
And that's why I'm like, I'm not saying that's what you have to do, but it, to me, is indicative. And I agree with it, 'cause seeing the trends in the podcast, like, we have to start taking this format really seriously, because this is not a hobby anymore. This can be your career. That's the first part about it.
Okay.
I think. The second part to your question is, yes, brand alignment is a big deal. Like, if you're going to sign to a network, make sure you're really clear about that brand alignment is important to you. And what we're lucky with is that all the podcasts we work with are they know who they are, they know what they're doing. They fight with us all the time with a particular brand. That's not right. It is right. I want to do it like this. Fine. That's great. That's our problem. And we learn more as we go through the thing. But the interesting part is, and the thing you can't get away from, and I know it's the purist in you, and I in my heart am you, but I'm a different animal now. And that is that
You're a sellout. That's the
I'm
animal.
a sellout.
It's
Yes.
called a sellout.
I'm
Thank
a sellout
you.
now. So the thing about the podcasting is, if you look at the other media formats, they're not economical anymore. They're struggling. And because podcasting from a cultural perspective is just free, we're used to getting them for free. As a podcaster, the average thing you can do is make enough money to make the next episode, right? And there is so much more you can do if you treat your show differently, if you treat your show like a career. And I want to have the biggest show. And why that is good is because, yes, am I beholden to brands? That's the real question. Now, if you were going to do a show on Netflix, if you know anyone who's worked with Netflix, it's a fucking pain in the ass, right? The amount of control and the amount of interference and what it is absolutely dominated by the requirements needed to make your show. So there's no freedom anywhere in any of the mainstream things. No one's just turn on mic, do whatever I want, that you have the freedom here.
Yeah.
But if you want to build a sustainable business in podcasting, and what I'm saying is, I now want my podcast to be my career, not my hobby. Then there are certain factors you have to take into play, and that is you are an independent person, but instead of the channel, you have these brands. That's your only real way. You're not going to make real money off of your YouTube revenue or your audio programmatic stuff. You're going to make your real money off brand alignments because there isn't any subscriptions or I don't know if you do subscriptions. It's like it must be 5% of your revenue subscriptions on Patreon.
It's very tiny.
Tiny, right?
Yeah.
So you're not going to make your money on donations. You're not going to make your money. Those are the money that's going to help you tick over for the next month. But if you want to build your business, you have to build it into the part of the unfortunately necessary evil, which is the channel. Now, the channel in this case are the brand partnerships you have. The lucky cool thing is you get to choose which partnerships they are.
Sure.
But if you build your show in collaboration with those brand partnerships, you've got a business and you've got a revenue stream and you have a podcast.
Do we have to sell out?
Well, I don't believe any of our podcasts sell out. None of them.
No, I hear you. That's politically correct. But realistically speaking,
No.
are you saying we need to sell out to be a successful,
All of the
commercially
research-
successful podcast?
All of the research says, all of it,
Yeah.
that and it was different 5 years ago, and it's the global research, that listeners don't mind ads. They don't like ads. They never like ads.
Yeah.
But they got ads when they watch YouTube, right? They're complaining, but they're still...
Please, YouTube is shoving ads down people's... I was
Yes,
forced
it's
to
too-
take premium.
It's too hectic. Yeah, me as well. It's too
Yeah.
much now. But let me give you another example. Radio. Radio has ads.
Correct.
No one goes, fuck the radio station because they're playing ads, right? It's not denigrating the ads, the radio station by having ads. Some podcasters, because we still love the medium, we think, oh, these fucking ads, right? But the audience don't mind it as much as you think they are. And there's the programmatic ads that suck.
Yeah.
There's for us as podcasters, is a big part of the revenue. But integrated ads, where like a cool drink brand or whatever
Yeah.
can come in and you can say, look, I've tasted the new cherry cola and actually it's not bad.
Yeah.
And that's cool. And you sort of speak about it in your own words, and that's not interfering. And your audience want you to succeed, and they know that that's a paid ad for you, and they're happy for you, right? So that isn't selling out in the way that you think it is. What is selling out is compromising the quality. Like if Mac G decided no more swearing, no more controversial stuff, I only want to speak to brands, he'd be selling out.
Sure.
But what he's done is he's blazed his way and got, this is how the fuck I am. Brands who know who I am and want to work with me in the environment that I'm in,
Yeah.
here I am. And he's probably lost a lot of revenue along the road to keep his thing straight.
Sure.
And every podcaster has that. I have one podcaster, you mentioned him earlier. Every fucking ad is a fight because he wants to do it right and he wants to do it his way and he wants to do it authentically. Fine. It's your airwaves. I don't own your radio station. You do. So you're only making my life hard. But so I don't think that the traditional thing of selling out is relevant in this thing.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I just want to say on the record, I've seen DJ Spoo do it, I think with an alcohol brand. I know Stephen Bartlett does it. I've seen Chris Williamson do it. It really pisses me off while I'm watching a conversation and then you cut to a guy telling you to click on something or whatever. Based on what you're saying, would you advise someone coming in new or someone who's already in looking to commercialize to be like, zero down on your brand, go meditate, go consult, figure out what it is before you sign up versus whatever brand you can get me? Because what you're saying about Mac, he came in, made sure that this is my brand and this is who I will be. And in future, people know who I am versus, look, if they want me to stop swearing, cool. If they want me to do more Christian content, cool. And then you start losing. And even some of your audience is like, oh, this is not who we thought it was. So kind of don't chase the money first, chase building the brand first, and then be ready to commercialize.
It's actually problematic to start with a brand. And this is one of the problems I'm having often with very established people who have the followers who are starting a podcast and they want me to get them sponsorship up front.
Yeah.
And we've had really bad, terrible
experiences,
a few of them. They never work out. And it's because for a whole lot of reasons, because as you know, and as Mac will attest, and all of the, like, if you're going to be in this game, it's a game of endurance and passion. If you don't love this thing and you're not doing it because you love it, you ain't going to get anywhere. If you're doing it for the money, you're fucked.
If you're doing it for the money, you're fucked.
Yes. So to your point, you don't have to know what your brand is, but you just got to have a rad idea that is super cool that you think is going to cut through and chase it. And like make it. And then once you feel you have a community, build your community. You're not selling your podcast, you're selling your audience.
Yeah.
Once you have an audience, then you can start asking those questions.
We're going to have to figure out, because I know I asked this already, but I'm just thinking out loud. We're going to have to figure out smarter ways to figure out who exactly our audience is and what they're into. I think that'll also help a lot in understanding which brands are aligned, because I think there's a lot of guesswork.
So tech is a new and really deep part of our business.
Yeah.
And what you can do now in tech that you can't do as an individual podcaster is insane. So this is the crap that podcasters don't care about, that brands wet their pants about. We can serve an ad into your podcast only to a specific audience who are only interested in specific things at different times. I can serve ice cream ads only when it's 30 degrees and above in Johannesburg, only in the region where my ice cream shop is, on your podcast. So the tech around audience, and it's what our whole business is deeply invested in, is understanding audiences. It's not size. Like, just because you got 1 million followers doesn't mean shit. You got to know who your audience is. What's the demographic? What are they interested in? And analytics is the game. Because if we're going to meet mainstream media, look, mainstream media has a problem at the moment. I mean, brands, marketing has a problem. And in my fantasy world, podcasting is the answer to that problem. But this is chalk and this is cheese.
Yeah.
And so this area is very exciting. It's untapped. This is the pod. And in it, it's like borrowing tech that's already doing it in Google ads and seeing how you can inject it into podcasting.
Are you guys looking into other platforms, in particular TikTok, number one, and number two, are you only focusing on podcasts, or are you looking into, I mean, you mentioned comedy, entertainment, and some of that, I don't know, kids that can, like, I don't podcast, I don't speak, but I'm really good at dancing, and maybe we can do brand deals on TikTok where I dance and I'm holding something.
So that, I hate to say this. This is just my opinion, people. That's the sellout part. So I see influencer marketing. I don't feel that works anymore. There was a time and a place.
You don't dabble in that space, or you don't want to?
I don't
just as a side business?
Well, in a way, the way we do it, so no. First of all, it's highly competitive. People are doing it all the time. And the idea is that here we go, Pen, here's a check to promote my product in 30 seconds on your Instagram page. That really is an abuse of your audience. There's nothing entertaining about that. You're not offering anything to your audience from that. You're taking the paycheck and you're putting your thing in front of them. In podcasting, you're actually developing a very deep relationship. And in this hour, we're trying to unpack a lot of information, high quality information. And you could have easily run 3 ads in here to pay for that you could have said, I just want to thank Tribal Media House Water for this podcast.
Yeah.
Wada. It's the best flavored water. I drink it every day. Right? So that
You're saying yes, it's the best flavored water. Get out of here.
So I don't think that's a high price to pay to listen to an hour of info. If I'm a podcaster and I'm hearing this conversation, I'm learning stuff about my industry or whatever. So in podcasting, we're giving value, and I'm trying to find as inobtrusive ways to actually give brands an opportunity to speak, and it works for everybody inside your airwaves. The same way that radio stations entertain, and then you pay for the entertainment through a couple of ad spots in the middle. And there's different ways we can do that, right? So that is the difference. And that's why I think influencer marketing is kind of dead, because there's no substance to it. But right now someone is tuned into your voice and into what you're interested in and into you. And we are talking around a subject, and the brands that we're talking about should be related to what we're talking about as well, so that they're on because those brands will benefit as well. And so the only way we dabble in it is we have something that we upsell to brands called podcast-led social media. But what we do is that rather than saying on your social media, I'm Pen and I drink Tribal Media House water, we say, I'm Pen, and on this show this week, I've got John Savage from the Africa Podcast Network. It's a super cool thing. We're also drinking Tribal Media House water, and we also ended up talking about the Nazis and the Holocaust. Right?
Hey!
Right? And that's your social media post, because you're adding value and it's organic, and you're giving the brand added value. And that's because they've already taken an ad out in your show. So we want to leverage as much support for them as possible so that they're getting value. It's a value exchange.
Sounds like you'd consider it, just not in a format that you're thinking of in your head. Because TikTok clips are doing a lot for people. And if you can find interesting ways to position certain brands.
But the people are doing it. I'm just not interested. It's already, people are doing it really well.
No, not in the way that I pitched it, but listening to what you're saying about the leveraging and the upselling and the other social media posts, there's probably going to be intelligent ways to get it done in some way.
Yeah. There is a local hip-hop star who I love and am friends with and will not mention, who only posts when there's a brand paying for his post. It annoys the shit out of me. Right?
Secure the bag. Yeah.
And doesn't ever post ever. It's just only when campaigns are on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand. Other type of content, would you look into it? Not necessarily dancing and those kind of things, but I don't know if, look, Mr. Beast and Ryan, for example, they're not podcasting, but they...
Yeah, they are. I consider them in the same arena. Definitely the content space.
Sure.
Yeah.
So if other kids are looking to create content like that, you can do work.
Yeah, look, I want to stick to my knitting for now. This is my passion and I love this thing, and we're learning a lot about this space. Definitely content creators are next in line to learn to the models we're creating, to see what else we can adapt them to. But I don't know. I mean, it's very hard to, I'm so in like a hurricane of this thing, and every day is like a year, it feels like. So it's very hard to know what's next or even how to take on more.
In your knowledge, the top, or you can just throw names of podcasts that you think are dope on the African continent outside of this country. I tried searching for top Nigerian podcasts. I struggled. I just found Honest Bunch, which I thought was dope. I don't know many others, and something's missing somewhere. Either people are not podcasting.
There are podcasts. Mr. Easy had a podcast.
Okay.
Which I was desperate to sign him, but he also, I think they did like about 6 months and then they stopped.
They stopped.
But I think that podcast is doing well. I saw it on the charts every week. It was really cool. And I'd love for him to start again. Look, a lot of the podcasts that are in that we're looking at, they are the ones that are doing well are like finance and education. That's such a big topic. There's a lot of religious stuff like
You're speaking audio. Or
both.
You're speaking
I do both.
visual?
We look at both.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm always interested in the audio, what's happening on the audio charts in the region, and what's performing well on YouTube. I like the best of both. And when we say podcast, we mean them both combined. We look at audiences or have them combined.
Okay.
So there's a lot of really great podcasters who I can't say I would, they're my jam.
Sure.
But it's definitely largely in like business, financial advice, unpacking difficult topics. Religion is a big one.
Yeah.
And then some entertainment stuff, and then sort of people just talking shit. That's also a big one.
But there aren't any that you can name, like in South Africans can say
Well,
podcast.
Kenya
until
has one
Tito.
called King Ori that is just
King Ori.
Yeah, it's just massive. It's called, I think it's called The Wicked Times with King Ori. That's a really big one. What's this one called now? The Unprofessional. It's called the Unprofessional Podcast. I think it is.
Okay.
That's a Nigerian. It's not unprofessional. It's really funny. It's like the unorthodox podcast, and it's someone unpacking financial advice in a really cool way.
Yeah.
Really on the street, like man on the street style, which is really cool.
Do you think we should be going throughout Africa trying to help them set up podcasts? Is there value in that?
I think there is, but there are lots of opportunities untapped. There are markets untapped. For example, I have a lot of brands that want to work in sport. There's virtually no sports podcast. There's very few. Anyone starting sports podcast, there's money ready for you.
I've heard.
Comedy, for some reason, the comedians don't have podcasts, and they should. And that there's a big space in those two things. There are no African language podcasts. And I just studied, I'm working with this network in South America, and I want to steal this to see if we can replicate this here. They are getting 80 billion streams, audio streams a month.
A month?
On other language soapies as podcasts.
Oh, telenovela.
It's called
They
audio
love them in
novellas.
Latin America.
They've just taken them all, made them into audio dramas, and they're killing it. And I'm wondering, what if we tried doing something like that here?
Telenovelas?
Yeah, for podcasts.
But a telenovela. I'm trying to figure out.
They're called audio novellas. That's audio only.
We've got Ukozi FM as an example.
So
has got stories like midday.
So I've been in chat to Ukozi for 6 months.
Yeah.
To try and, as an experiment, ask them if we can take their on-demand and put it to the test.
Sure.
But it shouldn't be us doing those things. Like, if I think that people should, it's going to take one guy or gal to come out with a Zulu podcast that smashes, and then it's going to be 30. So why not be that one?
Sure.
And there aren't even anybody trying it. Like, why not? And I think that's where there's a couple of Nigerian podcasts. There's a lot of French podcasts. So one of the interesting things is, which also proves the point that we just aren't innovating here yet.
Yeah.
Why are we just copying MacG? Why don't we innovate here and try African language and try different things?
Yeah.
But what is indicative is the French-speaking African countries, French podcasts from the rest of the world kill in those countries. They're doing so well.
Sure.
Again, reaffirming that we should be doing some stuff in our own languages. But it's not like that. The learning is, if you're getting into the game, there's so many opportunities.
Any long-term strategy in India, China?
We're in chats already. We actually have a partner for India and China already.
Sure.
Where what we've got access to, and we just don't know what to do with it yet because we're too small. They have all the same problems we have, except their market, the access that we have to the networks there is like 10 times bigger than ours. But they don't have any revenue flowing through. They haven't figured out the model that we've been working on with the tech that we're working on. So we're saying, why don't we come over there and start building something similar there for the Indian Chinese market? But we're not ready for it. It's just a conversation.
India's got YouTube. China doesn't.
Yes, but China has a large podcasting market. So what is interesting is that the rest of the world, we are ahead of the curve in this YouTube thing. The
Yeah.
rest of the world, when they said podcast, they only meant audio.
Sure.
But now, literally now, everyone's going YouTube mad, going,
Yeah.
oh shit, we've got to get onto YouTube, YouTube. So when I say China and India, I'm talking about audio podcast market.
Okay.
The YouTube part is not, it's still fledgling for podcasters everywhere else, whereas here it's mainstream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Said to the black guy, Savia. He's a monk. He's a practitioner of Bhagavad Gita or something along those lines, a branch of Hindu beliefs. Oh, I'm sorry for butchering this. I apologize. We sat down at Amped and we had a chat, and it got picked up in India. And some guy took the entire sit down and spoke over it. And the views on that in India, I was like, it's something that I've been thinking about ever since I heard Mr. Beast speaking on Joe Rogan about their fastest growing channel being Spanish. And I don't know what other language he was speaking about. You don't have to do the whole episode because episodes can be long. Trying to hire actors, interpreters, and those things. We don't have Stephen Bartlett money, unfortunately. But you could take like the most interesting clips, just get someone to transcribe and then get someone to dub in Swahili, French, just to start testing other markets. I don't know, as a seed.
My brother, AI does all that shit now. You can do full translations into languages, other alternate languages in the AI space already. There's even some AI that will re-lip sync you so that it looks like you're speaking in that language as well. You can convert.
Are we just sleeping on the software?
Yes, I'm about to the first thing I did when I got back, because I used to have a podcast that was all about podcasting.
Yeah.
I have just spent this week recording like 50 episodes, and it's all of the learnings and all of the things, and this is one of the subjects that are gonna. It's like what you can now do in the AI space. You got no excuses. You don't need Steve Bartlett. It's all there. So again, if you want to test India, you don't need anything. One AI tool.
We'll sort it out.
They'll sort it out.
Jeez, killing jobs is what we're about, boy.
Well, it's efficiency.
So the interpreters
I see it as efficiencies.
No, it is efficiency, and hopefully it's going to have a big benefit regardless. Okay, I think those are all my questions.
Now should we start the podcast?
I think we can start now. John, welcome. No, I think those are all the questions, because I know you and I are supposed to have a meeting, and having it on screen may not be the greatest. It's a bit dangerous. I'm not sure if there's anything else you'd like to share. People that are maybe seeing your face for the first time, maybe just a very quick summary of who you are, what you do, cassette, maybe touch on how Amped Studios came about, your vision for Amped Studios, and then you can speak about the African, should be called the African Podcast Network, the Africa Podcast Network, African Podcast Network, sorry, the Africa Podcast Network, APN.
Thanks. Hi, I'm John.
Hi, John.
I'm an ex-content creator and music maker that have now crossed the bridge into the sold-out environment, into the corporate sector. But I think my career path has been interesting. It's hard to describe what I do, but I know a lot of a lot of the musicians and the content creators that I started working with are still making content and making music today.
Yeah.
And I sort of moved over to the other side of the fence. I was in the middle for a long time, trying to figure out different monetization strategies. So my business is just about the main business, which is in broadcasting and APN and Amped. It all has the similar intention as how to create revenue for creators. I always struggled. I eventually started to find some things, and then I wanted to see if I could do that for other people. I always thought I was going to be the amazing podcaster, and I was doing it for myself. And then when I realized it wasn't
nothing wrong with that,
I realized it wasn't going to be me. I started doing it for other people, and I started working for the podcasting SPAC with Mac in the early ways.
Yeah,
and that's what our business is, just about building businesses that empower and create a bridge for brands to work with creators and creators to work with brands. And Amped is essentially that as well. It's an empowerment hub that is free for creators, that brands can play in that space as well. And we do masterclasses every week. We do these speed networking sessions, so you get to meet people. It basically answers, from the creator side, it answers all the problems that you have as a creator. If you're at home with a great idea and no idea how to bring it to life,
Yeah.
Amped will do that. And then from the other side, brands are wondering how to access creators. How do they get hold of Pen? They have to fucking DM him,
Yeah.
and hopefully he'll get back, you know?
Yeah.
So we're trying to build that bridge where there's an easy way for brands to work with creators and there's an easy way for creators to work with bridge with brands. And APN is just an extension of that. We were always doing that with, and in broadcasting, Amped was a project we started, the Jacques Culture House we did with Trezor, which is like Amped for musicians, mentorship, and all the projects we're doing are essentially involved with that.
Thank you, John.
That's the nutshell version.
There's nothing wrong with building something for yourself. I think some of the greatest creations we have today, I think of Miss Rachel. She's got a huge YouTube platform. One of my kids watches Miss Rachel. I think she has a child, if I'm not mistaken, that was diagnosed as autistic. So she created this channel for the child.
Right.
And it blew up into something really huge. You look at Sal Khan of the Khan Academy. He started off making videos for, I think, his nieces and nephews for maths. Other people started watching the content, and next thing he's got an online school. So we appreciate you starting this work for yourself and the unselfishness in saying, look, if not me, then hopefully other people will benefit from this. You've taken a movie to Cannes. You've been part of a band that's toured globally. I don't know why you never speak about these things.
I want to tell you, purely selfishly, outside of my podcast, I've just started a podcast with my son.
Dope.
And it's called The Wolf. I'm promoting it for him now. It's called The Wolf Pack Knowledge Quest.
Sure.
He's 9.
That's dope.
Yeah, so I'm promoting, I'm doing something for us.
There's, that's another gap in the market.
The kids market.
The kids market.
Hell yeah. Yeah.
There's so much that we haven't explored. I wanted to bring my son here last year. He's turning 14. But I just thought of this idea of we can start off with smart kids. Later on, bring all kinds of mediocre kids.
Yeah.
But smart kids just having chats. And you're like, because the guests that I've had here.
Yes.
Number one, I was shocked, but maybe I shouldn't have been. People are like, I didn't know there are people that are having these types of conversations and these type of people. I'm like, it's because we just don't give them platform. And you guys have been given this box of it's only politicians and sports stars and musicians that get to do interviews. And no one does deep dive conversations about anything else. You don't know that there are Black South Africans who love anime. You don't know there are people who are based around the world in various ways doing really cool things.
Have you ever been to Comic-Con?
I haven't.
When you walk into Comic-Con, you will wonder, where the fuck are these people for the rest of they are
Comic-Con here.
Yeah, the one in
Sandton.
Joburg.
Yeah.
20,000 people a day, dressed to the hilt.
Sure.
Where are they?
Weirdos.
The other
Where the hell are you?
364 days of the year. They're there.
Yeah.
To your point, I'm amplifying your
Now
point.
we need to do that. There was was it Jay-Z? Was it Jay-Z? I'm not sure if it was Jay-Z. There's a music video or something I saw on YouTube where they were profiling different Black people doing cool things. And there's these Black guys who went to Japan to set up an anime business. I'm like, we don't even know about these things. So there's a lot to be done. We've got short stories that haven't been told, to what you're saying about we've got unique things. We can do telenovelas. Nollywood was built on the stories that they told, how we can translate that. There are so many African folklore stories in South Africa and African history with a twist of fiction like Marvel, where you take on Thor and you create him. There are so many things we haven't played around with. And I'm one of the people that's really hoping that content creators are going to get more innovative. The idea of copying and pasting what works is cool as a start, but sooner rather than later, because Kanye started with sampling. Bring in some of your own flavor and bring in unique stories that people may not know. I think that would be dope.
Yeah.
Any closing words?
Thank you for having me.
Make a dope podcast. Sign up to Africa Podcast Network. Let's dominate the world. The world is ours.
Yeah. Fuck the podcasters.
Oh, fuck the podcasters.
That's a joke. I was making a last joke. Cut.
You guys don't have any questions? Sorry, before John leaves.
Now I know that.
You guys might have questions that people might want to hear. So what is it about kids' podcast?
I just met a kid. I met someone in DC who's 5-year-old kid as a podcast interviewing scientists.
In DC,
Yeah.
5-year-old kid
He's a 5-year-old kid.
interviewing scientists.
He has his own podcast and he interviews scientists about stars, the moons, dinosaurs. It's crazy.
I can imagine. Sorry, Debza. I can imagine. Kids always ask why.
Yeah.
Why? And having like a why podcast for kids, where it's like send your kids why questions that you can't answer. We always tell them shut up. No, we've always done it like this. Send all your why questions from your kids, and then we'll try and answer them, and we'll get kids to answer them as well.
Yeah, it's cool.
We've spoken about this curious thing, and the only radio station that's doing it now is Power FM. They do it on Tuesdays with, I think, Itabiso. It's a 15-minute slot. You can hear the kids are driving with their parents, and you just call them. And they just
Other stations have done that before.
like
They
random
copy.
questions, They are the ones that are doing it now. I haven't heard maybe the other ones.
No, a lot of them have been doing it for a while.
It's interesting. But yeah, just the idea that why is it not picking up in SA?
It's not picking up. I think for some reason we need to be kicked in the ass. It's innovation is the problem. I don't know if it's not. I don't want to say the word laziness or what. I don't know what it is, but there isn't a lot of innovation happening in the podcasting space, and it's ripe for it. And you don't even have to be so smart. Just look at what's working in the rest of the world and try one here, like alternate languages, like sport, like children's. But where are they? Where are the bad ones? There's not even bad ones. No one's even
Where are
trying
the bad
them.
ones?
Yeah.
Just experiment. Try
Yeah,
out
exactly.
different shit and be like, we're sending this to the game. Someone will pick it up and make it better.
I want to. It's more of a statement, but you can add on to it. The more we want freedom, like the idea of selling out, is the more the old way of doing things just comes back.
Keeps coming back.
Like in the beginning, YouTube was like, you can post at any given point in time, it doesn't matter. Then it's like, no, man, go back to the TV model. It's appointment viewing. I need this thing at this time, and people just tune into that. So it's almost like with the thing that you're speaking about now with selling out and for brands and all of that. Ultimately, something starts off nice. It's like, it's freedom. And then you're like, no, go back to the TV model, the radio model. You need to shout out the brand at this specific time. And there's nothing much you can do. So it's almost like the more things try change, the more they stay the same. We cannot fight the traditional way of doing things, especially when things scale at a certain
Especially when
point.
things go.
Look,
Yeah.
yeah. I know you're right.
You've become a suit.
I'm becoming a suit.
You're
Becoming a suit.
You're becoming a
Yeah,
suit.
yeah,
Because
for
you
sure.
still have those indie hangovers, but
But
and
I'm also,
residue.
I mean, in my heart of hearts, I'm building a business that's really different.
Yeah.
But I can also start to see where you are forced to go back to the old ways and what you can still keep, and how long can you go until you can't do it. Maybe we'll be the exception. Maybe we'll just stick to what we're doing and keep doing it well. But who knows? I don't know, because at the end of the day, we're all reliant on the market, how the market works. I mean, one of the interesting big learnings for me is how I think things should be and how they are. And sometimes the harder you push into the way things are, you get more resistance. So you go like, okay, the only way I'm going to break through this is to start understanding how the way things are and adapting myself to how the way things are. Oh, that's working. Okay, so now I must do more of that for more of this to work. And then next thing you are part of the way things are as opposed to the way things ought to be.
How are you going to tackle the whole thing of you working with stars in terms of like M Studios? How are you going to tackle the whole idea of at some stage they're going to leave when they're going to get bigger?
Yeah.
Because
And get recruited as well.
Okay, so this
You
is,
take someone overseas, they meet Joe Rogan recruits them and they're gone.
so this
you're dealing with people that come from a specific background before, whether it was radio or they were faces of whatever TV shows. And I think you are the only student that has like all of them in one space. So how are you going to deal with that?
So this is how. Okay, so we haven't even opened this can of worms yet. So I'm currently. This has been a year in the making, and it's part of why I'm here in Joburg now. Is that
Full time.
no, this week.
Oh,
Well, I've
just
been here the
visiting.
whole week.
Okay.
I have the same thoughts, and we are now going around the world and local as well. We're trying to raise funding. We're in a VC fundraise. And why is that we have designed some tech that I really think is going to disrupt podcasting everywhere, because it's going to give the power of the commercial model over to the podcasters in a way that it's a game changer should it work. And the podcasters we are speaking to tested are really big podcasters around the world, and we're getting lots of positive affirmation. Wow, if you guys can do that, this is where we want to be. And so what we're trying to do is to say that big podcasters, even though some of them want to go over to a network, but the really big ones, Mr. Beast doesn't want to sign to a network, nor does Joe, if we can create some tech that podcasters can really utilize to run their whole podcasting business, take all the pain out and be in control of the revenue part, it's going to really change everything. And that's really what our business is, APN, and that's what it will be. But it's actually this tech that we're building is the most exciting thing to me. And we're trying to figure out, we're using APN as the test model to do the learnings to drive the tech. And so we've started building this thing now. And that is crazy, because I think the problem is in a tech business, you've got like 1% chance of actually making it. But from all of the stuff, I really think like right place, right time, this thing could be transformative. And it will change the industry for the better if something like this will work. But I'm not under illusions it will
You don't think the guys at YouTube are thinking of building something like this?
I've already been in chats at a very high level with YouTube because I wanted to do a YouTube integration. YouTube, you'd be surprised. The YouTube team is very small. It's tiny. And things like this, even making a decision to do something like this, takes years there.
Shit.
So I wanted to try and build something. And a big part of this tech is that we want the YouTube integration. And we're now finding, even though we love YouTube and we work with them and we are speaking at a very high level,
it's a problem.
these big companies can't move quickly, and this industry is moving really fast, and we are a nothing.
Yeah.
So we've moved very smart. We've also spoken to some of the really big tech businesses, and they're like, once upon a time we would have been able to do that, but now we're us. So so you build it, and we'll see if we can support.
That creates opportunity.
Yeah.
Because I know YouTube at some point was talking about merch, and then I realized that I don't think it's here in South Africa yet. It was only for America.
They've just launched. Well, they've launched like it's what people have been. I can tell you in the last 10 years, at least 100 people have started YouTube, what do you call them? Those video or AV businesses, platforms like YouTube to try and get people away from YouTube. And the one thing they added was like ad integration where you could sell merch or click on the thing and it would go to the shoes.
Sure.
YouTube have finally, after 10 years, they've finally introduced that, but not in Africa.
It's sad that we're not respected because TikTok also doesn't give us money.
Don't even get me started. This is my biggest bugbear. I'm out shouting at people, shouting at the conference organizers, shouting at Spotify because shouting at the analytics companies that aren't doing the research here.
How do we help you? How do we help you?
I don't know.
I know we must carry on doing good work so that you can speak about us elsewhere. But for any potential South African podcasters, content creators, or even corporates who are traveling around the world, how do they go around? Do they wear T-shirts with our podcast? Like, how do we help? Because you're fighting and it's some kind of a struggle. And you shouldn't be fighting alone, especially if there's a chance that we're all going to benefit in the future. So how do the rest of us...
I think we need to, this whole thing of let's all work together. I've got a real problem with it because everyone says it, nobody means it.
100%.
That's the reality. We love to say it. But as soon as there's $1 on the table, everybody goes, well, that's only I need that dollar, so fuck you. And I've been in so many meetings where we've said, let's do this together, and then it never worked out that way. And this is a real fundamental problem because I don't want to beg. I'm not trying to beg people to look at Africa. I'm trying to say to them, you're missing an opportunity. But the reality is the opportunity isn't actually defined yet. So there's a road there still. And all we've got to do is make sure that we are working together so the opportunity... The rest of the world, even the enemies are working together. The biggest competitor, Coca-Cola and Pepsi are working together. When it comes to why do you think there's always a Coke and a Pepsi machine next to each other.
Sure.
That's not by fluke. That's by design, right? And the research shows that you are more likely to buy when you have two different options than if there's just one by themselves. So both of them win, even though they're mortal enemies.
Sure.
And so I see when I plug in these other countries and the rest of it, that I'm plugging into a community where I can kind of get a feel for the environment. But here we can't. And that's the thing I'm trying to say is it's not about me and APN, but we're transforming APN into a vehicle rather than a network. Because if we can all feed into each other and find it, then we can go and say, well, this is the opportunity. 160 million people, this is their age, this is the demographic, this is their buying power, this is what they're doing. Surely you have some brands interested in that.
Should we be begging podcasters to work together? Should we, let's say you handpick two that you think are progressive on the same vision, go to the UK, go to America, make a fuckload of money, make a fuckload of connections, and then be like, come through us. Because clearly you guys don't want to work. We've been telling you, showing you, but because the idea of collaboration is some level of equal respect, and that's where people get entitlement versus I'm a boss. If you think you can do better than me, cool, then I can treat you like a boss as well. Otherwise, come through me.
Well, like someone I really love and respect is Trezor.
Yeah.
Now, Trezor is making inroads in the global, and Trezor, I'm not going to betray any of your, but what he is doing, no one has done.
Yeah.
His global infiltration, his connections, how he's built his shit is next level, multiplied by the next level, divided by 1, multiplied by 16 next levels.
Hey.
He is where we all dream of being. And what he is doing, and this is really, he is building his shit here. He's bought this farm now. He's building like an empowerment hub there for creators. That's also going to attract global stars here to come and work with local creators. I know that he, when he first started earning real money, he was building hospitals in the Congo. He's building Africa. He's building publishing. He's building the thing here because he gets the vision. And I think that's what is required. And a lot of our big stars, they don't do that. They don't do that bit. And Trezor is really, for me, the most inspiring because he is now in a position where he doesn't need it, but it's central to what he's trying. He's trying to elevate us, and he's building the infrastructure here. He's spending that money here, and he's connecting the dots globally, and he's inviting them here. And that's really like critical stuff. And that's a model I think that if the podcasters should adopt would be great.
The Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture is a mate. I know politicians and government or whatever, but he's visited podcasts. Gayton McKenzie.
That's the one guy I'm desperate to meet. I'd really think that if Gayton came to Amped and we could have it, I really feel, because I don't have access, as we were discussing earlier, that's someone I really think could change the game and has changed my feeling about whether engaging.
But do you think he could convince his colleagues? Because, one minister is one minister. You've got the rest of cabinets and parliament.
I don't know, but hearing him speak is the one time I felt this is someone I would like to have a conversation with. Because essentially, and I don't mean this in any arrogant way, what we're doing at Amped is the government's work, right? I think.
Creating a platform for young creatives, sometimes unemployed kids.
It's financial education.
Yeah.
It's community building, it's services, it's all of those things. And I think that the Amped model is scalable. I think that what we're doing at Amped could be elevated and expanded rest of country, rest of continent. And actually to be able to do that, there needs to be either involvement from billionaires or government. And so that's why... Or both, yeah. And so I'm so out of that world. So that is someone I would be interested in chatting to for sure.
Any wealthy South Africans you think could also make a shift?
Yeah, I just don't know who they are.
I was going to ask if there's anyone that you like. I think this person's a patron of creativity.
I'm such a nerd. I'm in the trenches from.
Sure.
I'm becoming a suit.
Okay.
But other people my age, they could answer that question like this. They could name you 5. I can't name you 1.
Sure.
I'm just not in that world.
Okay.
but I'm getting there. And I'm trying to become that guy.
No other questions. Happiness. It's not going to benefit the people. I'm just thinking of
It's about
questions that
this
might
big.
benefit the people.
That's all.
No, just the idea of, hey man, you see what you're building, it's definitely going to happen. You know, obviously if you believe and you put in all the hours and whatnot. I guess one of the issues that there'll always be an uphill, and we're also facing it in our industry, and I think in America as well. Just the idea of when an industry becomes too saturated, when anyone can do it, it becomes hard to scale that business. If you think about even in Hollywood, the big studios are facing a lot of issues because like Kevin Hart can say, I own a production company. The Rock can say it.
I love this insight. It's my favorite insight. Because here's the answer to that.
Yeah.
In the old world, there were gatekeepers.
Yeah.
And the people who decided whether your movie was going to get made was Rick Smith, who is having a bad day and he's already seen a script like yours. And to your earlier model, you make the movie, they make 10 movies, one of them pops, the other 9 junk. And it takes that one movie to finance the other 9, right? But, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, this is a much cooler environment because anyone can make stuff. And the people who decide what works or not are the audiences. You're totally beholden to the audiences, and there's no barrier of entry. So what is required is more thought, more innovation, being better, being cooler, finding ways to stand out. So your idea has to be even better than the next person because you are now competing. So it's more competitive. But when you break through with that, you are proving that there's an audience for it. You're building an IP for yourself, not for a studio. And for me, that's why this space is so much more exciting and cooler. But it's not a closing of a door. I think that's what the opportunity is. And that's why I'm saying, guys, get your shit together. Think bigger. Think smarter. Work together. Build shit that's going to do well on YouTube. Try stuff. Because if you win in that space, you are Mr. Beast.
Oh, I am Mr. Beast. John Savage, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Let's go have our real meeting where we can talk about real money and the audience can be left out of this.
Thank you, guys. Very much appreciate you all. Thanks for the time. That was really long. Jeez.
Otherwise,